Hey guys, it's Halsey Schider with the Helicopter Podcast, and I have an unruly guest right now who's trying to. I just totally derailed you, Gerrit.
You did. You got it. I'm proud of you. That's hard
Thank
to
you.
do, and you got it. I mean, first try and everything.
Hey guys, it's Halsey. Thank you to Vertical HeliCASTS for sponsoring and making the Helicopter Podcast a thing. If you haven't checked out the Vertical HeliCASTS platform yet, I highly suggest you do. It's my podcast, The Real Rescue, Vertical MRO, and the Hangar Z. And something really cool about the podcast for me is the community that my helicopter podcast has created. And part of that community is my good buddy, Gerrit Schulze. Gerrit, what's up, bro?
Hey, buddy. How you doing?
Good, man. I think I would have to go back, but I feel like you were maybe one of the early reacher outers, if that makes sense. Someone that early on had reached out and said, hey, look, I really like your podcast. You gave me some recommendations on some guests, including Adam Weaver, who was on. Great dude.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is it safe to say that you're like a fan of THP?
Who wouldn't be a fan? Absolutely. No, I think I was definitely one of the OGs, because I think that right about the time that I started getting into helicopters is about the time that you started your podcast. And, I'm just, a newbie thinking, man, what can I listen to? What can I watch? What can I see to learn more? And I think I stumbled across your podcast and Googled you and said, hey, this guy's from lived in Texas for a while too, and figured we'd connect.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. I just it's a vivid memory for me because admittedly, something that's been cool about this podcast that has been a thing is all the people that reach out. I really did not expect that. And even like going to HAI or now VAI, European Rotors here in a month, like I walk around and people are like, hey, can I get a picture? Or can I say hi or whatever? And it's like, I thought my mother would listen, or my dad, if he could figure it out. My dad would be like, I watched your podcast today. I'm like, where'd you do that? He's like, on Face Page. And I'm like, oh, cool. Thanks, Dad.
I mean, let's be real. Your mom stopped listening after episode 3.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no. Yeah. But anyway, I think it's been neat because it's actually created a community of a ton of people. I've been able to connect with so many new people, so many friends. And I think like the podcast is really a tool for continued networking. I think at first people think like, oh, it's a tool, I can network with Halsey and that can maybe help me. But what I find is I actually get tremendous resources, from all the people that I connect with. You and I, we do work together now, right? Like We do things. So I think it's just really neat because it's like, it's just an easy way in the digital revolution that we're in to just connect with like-minded individuals. Look, this isn't Joe Rogan. This isn't like a mainstream podcast. I completely get that. This is very niche. It's very centered into the helicopter world. And I think it's awesome that we have this community. So I'm glad that you reached out. I'm glad that we have a friendship. And, you have an interesting kind of story in helicopters, something that's a lot different than me. It's a lot different from our other guests that we've had, unless Adam, right? But that's been like over a year, I think, since I talked to Adam. So first and foremost, who are you? I see you have a Texas Suits shirt on. What is that?
Got to represent.
I know what it is, but I'll let you explain your business. And then let's just start diving in a little bit about you and your helicopter journey.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how far you want me to back up, but I'm originally from Braunschweig, Germany. Moved to the States when I was about 6 and lived in South Carolina for a while, and then moved over to Texas and got stuck here. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, and I think that's where I got my first, or first began becoming intrigued with aviation. We lived in a neighborhood that had a fly-in estates right next to us. And so as a young kid, I'd always cruise over there on my dirt bike and watch planes take off and land.
Cool.
And there were no helicopters in that neighborhood, but there was a guy who had a powered parachute. And I always watched him because I was so fascinated by that little A-frame looking thing that he flew through the air. And one day he said, you want to come fly with me? And I said, absolutely. Let me go ask my mom. I drove back home and said, hey, Mom, can I go fly with that guy? And she said, absolutely not. Don't get anywhere near that thing. So naturally, I drove back, hid my dirt bike, and jumped in with him. Said, yeah, she said it was fine. So that was my first taste of aviation at 10 years old. And
that's hilarious. Now you being an attorney, understanding the liability of that situation.
I know. Yeah.
I forgot that you're a powered parachute guy. I want a tangent on that because
sure.
I'm always super fascinated to kind of talk about anything that I'm not familiar with. But for the purpose of the podcast, since it's fly related, I think it's completely acceptable to talk about.
I agree.
Powered parachute. Tell me about a powered parachute.
So I fly what's called a Powerachute. It's mine is an old one. It's made in 01. It's got a little 582 Rotax, 2-cylinder, 2-stroke, and a little fan on the back. It's a 2-seater trike. That's got a 550 square foot wing, and it's essentially two controls. You've got steering lines, but you've got throttle. More throttle, go up. Less throttle, go down. No throttle at all and no engine, still go down. So, but it is probably the safest form of civil aviation because, if anything goes wrong, you slowly float back to Earth. I always joke with my friends that freak out over it. I say, if something goes wrong, your parachute is already deployed, right?
It's true. I guess I get more worried about the lines disconnecting or something. What's the possibility of that?
What are the odds of that happening, right? And there's 48 of them. So,
okay, so you got
48 aren't going to all disconnect.
I think it's super cool. I know it's not a powered parachute, but when I was a kid, there was a movie that came out. I think it was called Fly Away Home or something like that. And it was about this dad and his daughter that essentially had to help these geese migrate, and they used ultralights.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like,
I've seen it.
That's a kid, and she's flying a freaking ultralight. That means I can fly an ultralight. So I went on. My poor parents probably had to hear about my ambition for them to buy me an ultralight as a young child, and they never did, luckily. And actually, I think that's an irresponsible movie. What kind of irresponsible father is having their daughter fly an ultralight cross country? Unbelievable.
Hey, sometimes the geese need the help, though. Okay,
I guess
you got to make sacrifices.
So the powered parachute was kind of your entry into aviation. Is it something that you still actively do today?
Not as much as I want to, but that's only because when I walk out into my little hangar and see a helicopter here and a powered parachute here, I'm going to go get in the helicopter because it's more fun.
It makes sense. And what is a top speed of a powered parachute?
So you're essentially governed by your wing. Mine will do 35 miles an hour. It'll go 35 miles an hour up, down, straight. That's its speed.
That's awesome, though. I mean, that's actually pretty good. It's quicker than I thought. How long can you fly for?
It's got a 10-gallon tank, so about 2 hours.
Nice.
But after 2 hours, you're done. You're swinging around enough.
Circle around and fly. I mean, you're flying fairly low level, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 300-400 feet. I live up by Canyon Lake, South Central Texas, and I fly over the lake and around the lake, around the dam, and it's beautiful. It's fun. It's slow to where you can, see everything, and it's relaxing enough. It's not going to try to kill you like a helicopter does. So you can take your hands off the controls and just chill. That's what I like about it.
And there's also powered parachutes that aren't like a trike, right? Where it's just a straight up, you have a propeller on your back and you're just going for it.
That's a powered paraglider.
But that's different.
Same general concept, yeah.
Have you done that?
I have not, no. No, heck no, I don't want to run to start.
Now, non-powered paragliding, that looks pretty fun. I always kind of felt like that might be something that I would get into. But I'm having to like delve down my hobbies recently. There's just between mountain biking, skiing, and kiteboarding, which is a parachute sport, kind of a wing sport, I guess. My wife kind of feels like I'm maxed out on spending money on hobbies, and so I agree with her. So as of right now, I'm not doing the paragliding, but I may someday. If there's anyone listening that's like into paragliding, you want to like, hook a brother up or whatever, let me know. That'd be awesome.
I always thought of paragliding the same as like just glider planes or whatever. I want to be able to go back up. I don't want to.
You can, bro.
Done.
You can. Thermals.
Yeah.
Dude, they're climbing. They're like flying. I think Facebook knows my algorithms or face pages, my dad would say, and it's like, I get all these paragliding videos, and these guys are like crossing these mountain ranges, and like, oh, we're gonna make it, and then like it's beep 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 beep. It's like a little beeper that shows them like they're catching a good thermal. And
have you seen those wingsuits?
Oh,
and the guys that are like 3 inches from the edge of the canyon scooting down.
Oh yeah,
that looks cool.
So I have a story about that. So if you go back and listen to, I think it's like the 11th or 12th episode, it's the In Helicopter podcast I did with my buddy York.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how specific I'm supposed to be, so I'll be more in general. But we were able to land in a really neat area. That was all approved, good to go. Right on the edge of a canyon. It was York and a couple other helicopters. And some of the participants that were with us were also wingsuit flyers. And so those of us who don't do that hung out on the canyon wall on the edge. And another helicopter went up a few thousand feet, and they jumped out of the helicopter, and they wingsuited past us. And it was nuts because they got so close to the cliff, and just the sound, it sounded like a fighter jet had passed me by. And then once they passed, the cliff wasn't that tall, maybe 500-700 feet. So, I mean, they had to get ready to pull their chute once they're at our level.
Yeah.
And they were able to climb. The guy goes, and then he pitches up and he climbed like 100, 200 feet. And then he deployed his parachute. And it was like, what the actual, that's like a different.
Yeah.
And then we had a picnic. These guys just ate lunch like normal, like nothing. Like nothing out of the ordinary just happened, just completely crazy. So, all right. So you get a experience in the power parachute. What happens next?
Thank you to our sponsor, Vertical Aviation International. Are you ready for the largest vertical aviation show in the world? Verticon, formerly HAI Heli Expo, is coming to Dallas in March. With over 15,000 professionals and 600 companies in attendance, this is an event you don't want to miss. If you're interested in exhibiting, contact sales at verticalavi.org. That's sales at verticalavi.org. See you at Verticon.
Yeah, that's where I started. We bought some property, got some acreage, had some room in the backyard, and this is perfect for a powered parachute. So that's where I started. And this was only, 4 or 5 years ago. Started with that and then loved it. And then powered parachutes are one of those things, the winds have to be perfect. Otherwise, you're not going to go fly. And so it was 6:30 in the morning or 7:30 in the evening. And even then, only if the weather's perfect. And so I got tired of getting everything ready and not being able to go fly. And so then I said, well, next step, I'm going to get an airplane. And then I thought about it some more and I said, well, airplanes are cool, but everybody flies airplanes. Helicopters are even cooler, and I can do that in my backyard. So I bought a Rotorway Jet Exec that a gentleman up in Austin, Texas put together. And it was really cool. So an experimental helicopter with a single solar T62 turbine engine. And thought, heck, if I'm going to get into helicopters, might as well get into turbine helicopters and build turbine time from day one. So bought that thing, took it home, said, well, I better learn to fly this with somebody who knows how to fly it rather than me try to figure it out. So I ended up hauling it up to West Plains, Missouri. There's a gentleman who is aptly named Orville.
Perfect.
Yeah.
how flighty.
Yeah,
how aviation-esque.
Right?
Yeah,
exactly. He couldn't have a better name. And did a week with him, learned to hover, and then he sent me back home and said, go hover by yourself forever. And that's what I did. I took it back home. I pulled it off the trailer. I put the blades back on it. It's the beauty of experimental helicopter. I can work on it myself. Put the blades back on it. Put it up in the air the first time. I think I got 5 hours into hovering it by myself. Then I had a tail rotor U-joint fail while hovering, which is great for a 5-hour pilot to learn.
Totally.
Did my first real hover auto, I guess.
Yeah. So what happened in that situation?
Well, as a baby pilot, my mind didn't go to reduce power. My mind went to get this thing on the ground. And that's what I did. Bent a skid, but that was it. But U-joint in the tail rotor drive shaft failed, came apart. And yeah, I think I did about a 270-degree turn before I hit the ground.
I was going to say, did you spin pretty hard?
No, I felt it break. I mean, I felt it in my pedals. So
wow.
I set it down right away. It was actually the first time that my wife came out to watch me hover. And
Perfect.
So you can imagine
like,
how excited she was.
Man, you suck.
I know, exactly. So I don't think you're supposed to do that.
Now, I just want to put a disclaimer out there. We're going to be talking about experimental aircraft during this podcast. And I've talked about experimental aircraft with one other person. His name is Adam. In fact, Adam really inspired me and gave me a nice perspective on the experimental community. Being a certified guy myself, I kind of find that experimental guys are a little weird, which they are. I don't think that they are. They just are weird. And so we're talking about this stuff today. And I think that there's a place for experimental, and I want to hear more about your thoughts. I'm guessing that you've probably also learned a lot of things, and maybe you might have done things a little bit differently now knowing what you know. And so I think if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, man, I want a $120,000 turbine helicopter that I can go fly in my backyard, you can do that, right? But you really got to, it's not just go pick up a helicopter and start messing around and fixing it and doing this. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. And I think the reason why experimental guys maybe get a bad name is because there's too many people that choose just to jump right into it and they do stupid things.
Yep.
And when you do stupid things, bad things can happen. And that happens in certified helicopters all the time too, right?
Yep.
Stupid people do stupid things and there's accidents. Of course, not always the case of accidents, but it happens in both worlds. So I just want to throw that out there. This is cool. This is a cool episode. And if you feel inspired to maybe go the experimental route, you should reach out to guys like Gerrit.
Definitely.
You should reach out to guys like Adam Weaver. Really fully understand it, grasp it, have a training plan, know exactly where you got to go. That said, what are some things you look back now of those early days hovering around, having a little bit of a failure that you cringe a little bit, or do you feel like you actually kind of did the amount of due diligence that you thought was necessary at that time?
I will say this. I did not do my due diligence before buying that helicopter. I bought that helicopter. I was excited about it. It looked great. It looked like a lot of fun. It sounded amazing. When I went and looked at it, it started right up. It picked right up into hover. I mean, it was awesome. I really was super excited about it. And so I started calling around to some, other helicopter people that I knew, and there was nobody that could go do a pre-buy inspection on an experimental turbine-powered rotorway. And there's not a lot of turbine rotorways in the U.S. that are flying. And so there's a ton of rotorways, big rotorway community. The community is amazing and so supportive and helpful. But what I know now, what I should have done back then is get really heavily involved in the rotorway community before buying one. Because there's a lot of stuff that I would look out for now that I didn't really look out for or know to look out for then. I mean, I checked all the bolts. I checked all the, the frame didn't have any cracks in it. The tail looked fine. I mean, there was nothing that should have told me to be wary of a tail rotor failure, right? And now I know what kind of signs to look for. So in the future, and for anybody that's listening that's thinking about going to buy a used rotorway, or a rotorway that somebody else built, get somebody that knows something about rotorways to go with you and look at it, and really get yourself into the community before you go and buy it. But it was a learning experience, and I don't regret a minute of it. And it was a lot of fun.
No, I think it's good advice, right? If you want to do anything in life, it pays to start kind of getting involved in that community.
Definitely.
For instance, when I go kiteboarding in a new location, I'm kind of like weird. I don't want people to hate me, right? I have like this, maybe it's called an ego. I feel I'm fragile. I don't want people to be upset. And I think in kiteboarding, I've experienced it on my home turf back in Corpus when I was doing a lot of kiting in Corpus, where these people would come in that aren't familiar with the area. They're maybe not great kiteboarders in general, and then they just mess everything up, And it's like, oh, it's annoying. It's not safe. It's dangerous. And so, like, if I go to a new spot, usually I'll go the day before and I'll hang out, and I'll just be at the beach and I'll be talking to people. Hey, what do you do? How do you do this? How do you do that? And you learn so much, even in just that little, 2 hours of hanging out, watching other people doing what you're wanting to do. And then the next day you come out and you're not like a complete jerk, right? So I think like in anything, it's not a bad idea to immerse yourself. And I can only guess that there is a very active Rotorway community of people that literally have nothing better to do with their lives except sit on computers and chat with each other online about their rotorway and their build. Did I hit it on the head?
I don't know that that's how I would classify the Rotorway community. They're all pilots. They're all competent. They're all incredible people. They're so helpful and caring about one another. I mean, safety is the number one priority. And it's so cool to see people come together with the same type of aircraft to improve each other's aircraft, like my tail rotor failure. I think most of the jet execs that are flying have now upgraded their tail rotors to new high-speed U-joints because they were using steering U-joints at some point. That long story. But anyway, everybody learns from each other's mistakes and improves the aircraft as a result of that. And that's what's so cool about it. Do we sit on a computer? I think so too. But we're spending more time wrenching on the helicopters than anything else.
I guess I wasn't meaning it in a negative way. I was trying to paint a picture of like, there's some very enthusiastic people, I'm sure, about rotorways.
Absolutely.
And one way to communicate is obviously through online forums and things like that. So no disrespect to the Rotorway community. If you're listening, I appreciate you guys. I support you guys. Okay.
Heck yeah.
I had Adam on. I got Gerrit on now. Do I want to fly one? Not really. But I also don't want to fly some certified aircraft too. I mean, that's just the honest truth. I just certain things I do and don't do. And that's, I'm
going to tell you this right now. I still have a turbine powered rotorway that I'm working on right now. And I'm going to get you to fly in it with me when you come to visit.
I'll hover it.
Okay. I'll let you do that.
I don't want to go to altitude.
I will say this, Adam Weaver is a great friend of mine, and you had him on, and he talked at length about his jet exec, and that thing's been problem free. I mean, that aircraft is bulletproof. I would trust flying that thing across the country. As Adam built it, I've seen his quality of workmanship, and he knows so much about it, and it's built right. And I think that's the big key component is, anybody can go out and buy an experimental kit and put it together themselves, and it's only going to be as good as the quality of workmanship that went into it. So
100%. I think part of the issue for me is I'm not that way. I'm not very good at putting things together. I can do a Rubik's Cube. Okay, that's cool.
That's impressive.
But thank you.
More than some.
Yeah, in fact, actually here we'll do a live demonstration as you're talking. Don't worry.
All right.
But I'm just not a tinkerer. I'm not a good builder. I'm just, it's not my thing. So when I put myself in the experimental, like my buddy's building an experimental plane right now, a Vans.
Cool.
Vans RV, been around for years, very reputable, awesome airplanes.
Very safe.
And I'm thinking like very safe. But I'm thinking like, man, the last thing I want to do is get a plane that someone made, and this is because it's like my mind. I go to like, oh, Halsey's building it. And my buddy Justin is building it. He's not an engineer, but he's like an engineer. Right. He might as well be self-taught computer programmer. I mean, he's just that guy. Adam, very much that guy. What about you? I mean, I know a lot about you. You're an attorney. You're not necessarily like Adam's like a turbine scientist or something crazy weird.
Yeah, I forgot the technical term for what it does.
Something really smart,
Fluid dynamics.
Fluid, yeah, like crazy smart guy. Not that being an attorney isn't crazy smart either, but it's different than that. Specifically on the engineering side. What has it been like for you to have the ability to work on your aircraft? What have you learned? Is that something that you were already kind of good at? Just kind of walk me through that.
My dad was an engineer and he built everything. I mean, everything. And so when I was younger, we built my first go-kart when I was like 4 years old. And it has, of course, controls that a 4-year-old could handle. And then as I got older, we built faster go-karts, and then we built dirt bikes, and then we restored cars. And so my dad and I always worked on things like that together. So I've been mechanical my entire life. I like rat rods. Those are my hobby. I've got a 63 Lincoln Continental that I put a Cummins diesel engine in that I'm working on right now. So I've always been mechanical. I've always wanted to, build things and be hands-on. And that was a big, aside from the fact that experimental aircraft are cheaper, that was a big push for me too. It gives me so much anxiety looking at a certified helicopter in my hangar that I'm not allowed to touch, that I'm barely allowed to clean if it's dirty. And so that's been the big thing for me. And that's what drew me to the experimental aircraft, is getting to be hands-on, getting to improve the design. If I think torque tube doesn't look right, I can build my own, put it in and fly the helicopter. And on my certified helicopter, I can't even tighten a loose screw if I keep record.
No, you can't. What do you think it's a prerequisite? Because I know that a lot of the appeal of the Rotorway or other similar aircraft is the cost. It's significantly cheaper. Do you think if you're someone like me that's not a tinkerer, not good at building stuff, never has that mind, never good at it, but you like the idea of paying for an affordable, cheaper helicopter, do you think it works still? Or do you really need to be like a hands-on type of person to really make an aircraft like that work?
I think a lot of it, of course, depends on the aircraft itself. But, just to use this as an example, if you were to buy Adam Weaver's Jet Exec, I think you could fly that thing trouble-free. I think that there's a certain amount of maintenance that you would be able to do, checking bolts to make sure they stay tight and things like that. But at the end of the day, that thing is, probably not much more maintenance intensive than an R-22 would be. So it's absolutely possible for somebody who's not uber mechanical to own one. Now, I also wouldn't put somebody who doesn't know the first thing about mechanics in one, right? Because you got to be able to feel the vibrations and know what you're looking for and be prepared if something goes wrong, or know what's going wrong if it does. So, but I think anybody who's competent and capable of flying a helicopter can handle an experimental helicopter.
I'm sure producer Zach is hopefully listening in intently and doing his job, and he can attest that I am 100% not that person. In fact, like, we'll go mountain biking. Don't want to toot my own horn. I'm a good mountain biker, especially climbing tech. I'm phenomenal. Just great, okay? Not a big deal. Zach, also very good mountain biker. Zach is a very technical guy. He'll make fine-tune adjustments on his bike every single time we ride. And he's like, oh, this and that, da. And I'm like, just pedal. Just pedal
your
harder.
Chains grinding.
Oh, yeah.
Your
I'm
chains
like,
popping off.
Yeah. Just pedal. Like, I don't need to do any of the other stuff, Zach. He's like, well, doesn't it feel? He'll get on my bike and he'll be like, how do you ride that? I'm like, I just pedal. I just ride it like a bike. And then granted, he'll make some adjustments and I'll be like, okay, yeah, I get, there's a point. So, I get both sides, but
I know several people that have Rotorways that really enjoy them, and they just have somebody else do their maintenance, just like a certified helicopter guy would. So it's possible. It's doable.
Now, you mentioned that you have a certified aircraft in your hangar that gives you anxiety because you can't touch it. So you started with the experimental. You ended up with 2 Rotorways, I think.
Yep.
Crazy guy. And and now you have a Schweitzer, and you've been flying. You're just so untraditional. It drives me nuts. You've also been doing your training in a Bell 47.
Yep.
For the certified training. So I guess walk me through the rationale of the Bell 47 and training in that, what that's like. I've never flown that aircraft, so I just want to hear your opinion.
Bell is proud to sponsor Vertical HeliCASTS and their vision to hold meaningful mission, safety, and best practice conversations in the helicopter industry. The lessons learned from these conversations will undoubtedly shape the future of both new and veteran helicopter operators.
I'm a big guy. I'm 6'2", 240 pounds. And so I'm absolutely at the absolute upper limit of somebody that can fly in a rotorway. But somebody told me once that the seat weight limit on the R-22 was like 240 pounds or something like that. So I was already right there. And I didn't, I live in South Central Texas, so I like my tacos, and I wasn't going to give those up. So my local flight school here flew Bell 47s or R-44s. And heck, I was always planning on just flying my rotorway. And so when it came time to do the training, I wasn't going to pay for the R-44. The Bell 47 was just as good. Plus, it looks cool. And I know some people don't like them. I think they're the coolest looking helicopter. And so that's why I picked that. And I absolutely love flying the 47. The flight school has a G4 and a G2. And they're both absolutely amazing. And kind of go back
for those of us who know nothing about the Bell 47. What is a G2 and a G4? What does that
Couldn't
mean?
tell you. No, it's just that the G2 is narrower, smaller engine. G4 is bigger, more power. 3-seater.
No, I mean, look, I've heard incredible things about the 47. In fact, I think there's like some utility operations that even to this day swear by the 47. When I look at one up close, it just freaks me out a little bit.
Well, see, that's where being an experimental guy comes into play, or being a powered parachute guy comes into play. They don't look scary. They're just naked.
They are naked's a very good way to put it.
I will.
What is it like flying that? I mean, you've now been able to fly multiple machines. I guess try to paint the picture of what it controls like. What does it feel like? Does it feel like a Bell 206? I don't know if you have that experience, but like what?
No, I'm not that cool yet. One day. So the rotorway, I'll compare it to the rotorway. The rotorway just feels like it's going to try to kill you at all times. The smallest input makes it do, 90 miles an hour that way, 90 miles an hour that way. It's all over the place. It flies like an R-22. The Bell 47 is like driving an F-350 dually. Like it just it's there. It goes. It autos like no other. I mean, the rotorway or the R-22, they drop like a rock, and there's no rotor inertia. The Bell 47, you can auto it all the way to the ground, and then you can probably pick it back up and auto it a second time without applying engine kind of thing. It's got so much rotor inertia. It's such a cool feeling. And yeah, it's like driving a big old truck.
Yeah, I do love that, actually. That is pretty cool. I'll give you that. So the idea when you started flight school wasn't, by the way, that you all while podcasting too. Like, come on,
that's
guys.
impressive. I forgot you were doing that.
This is how you know I'm a helicopter pilot, because I can multitask. My wife yells at me because we'll be watching TV and I'll just be like doing this with like one hand. Typically, it takes forever, but she's like, "That's so distracting. How do you focus?" And I'm like, "I have ADD or something. Like I have to have this going. Like."
I have solved one Rubik's Cube in my life, and the way I solved it is by taking the stickers off and putting them on the appropriate sides.
Yep. These are painted. Painted on. So you weren't necessarily going to school to go the certified route. It just that happened kind of.
It was
ironically.
Yeah, there's not a lot of CFIs that'll train in an experimental helicopter that somebody else built, just for safety reasons. Everybody's worried. Workmanship and that sort of thing.
Go figure. It's crazy thought.
I know. And so for me, it was, all right, every time I want to learn more, I got to drive up to Missouri to learn, or down to Florida to learn, or I'll just go to my local flight school and I'll learn in a certified helicopter and, apply that same knowledge to the rotorway, and then just do some, some recurrent training in the Rotorway here and there. But I did, after that initial run in Missouri, I did go back up to Missouri to do my altitude training in my Jet Exec. We did that for a little over a week. And then he set me free down here in Texas to do some altitude around my yard. And yeah. And yeah, I did get I bought a second Jet Exec. There's some safety modifications that you have to do to them that the Jet Exec community has learned over the years, and this one didn't have the mods done, so I bought it to do the mods, to really get down to the nitty gritty of working on it. And my plan's always been I was gonna fix this other one up and then sell one of them, and I ended up selling one before I finished this one, and yeah, I bought that 269 against your advice or against your wishes.
I didn't say I was not against it. You're a quick mover, Gerrit.
What? No.
I'm a guy that can really foil a process with due diligence. I just wanted to make sure that you were crossing your T's, dotting I's, and you did.
Yep.
You did your due diligence, and that's all I cared about. I love the Schweitzer. I think the Schweitzer is a great aircraft. When you actually get to fly yours, you'll get to agree that it is awesome.
It looks great in my hangar with the blades sitting next to it in a box, since I'm not allowed to put them on myself.
Yeah, what'd you figure out on that, pal?
Still waiting to put them on. We're actually going to get them cleaned up before we put them back on, because might as well. I can't fly it right now anyway, so might as well use it to make the helicopter better.
Totally. I mean, Schweitzer's great, man. And they're, making a bit of a comeback. I had the CEO, David, on. Talk about a guy that's like passionate, right? Like, I got the sense when I talked to him, it was like, I don't think he needed Schweitzer, right? I think he had a pretty good career. He probably could have, happily ridden off into the sunset. And instead he invested in Schweitzer and, bought the company and routed up some other investors and, talk about a labor of love. And the guy is he's just so passionate about the aircraft. I think that's cool.
I love it.
I'm rooting for Schweitzer. They got a couple new programs like where you can send them in and they'll refurbish or they'll overhaul. Parts support is obviously getting better. I think when people think of like manufacturers not doing a great job, they think about like delivery times. Oh, how many new aircraft are you delivering? And that's not what makes a good OEM, especially one that's had a lot of issues, bankruptcy, things like that. It's how are you supporting the existing fleet? I mean, that has to be priority number one. MD Helicopters, my conversation with Brad over at MD, very similar. Like, hey, we want to build new helicopters, but we got to support the 1,000 units that are out there. So
it's a longevity game. If you don't support what you have out there, those customers are going to go switch to somebody who will support their aircraft.
100%.
And then you're not going to sell new aircraft.
So what has it been like for you? Just this whole helicopter journey, what has it been like compared to what you thought it would be like? What do you like about it? What do you not love about it? If there's anything, and what are you excited to keep learning about?
For me, it's been a hobby from day one instead of a career. And so I've got a lot of patience, but that's been the one thing that has gotten me on it. I mean, I bought the Jet Exec in January of 2023, I think it was. So I'm, a year and what are we in October? A year and 10 months in. And I started the licensing right away. And I'm sitting here, 2 weeks or so away from my private check ride.
Nice.
I've been messing around. I spent months fixing a tail rotor issue. I spend months working on other things in it. So it's been a lot slower than I expected. I'm really excited to get my license to actually go fly and not worry about.
You'll do your check ride in the 47.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it at my local school here in the 47. The DPE that comes down to us flies in the 47. He's a Hughes and Schweitzer guy too. So,
what's his name?
Roger Sharp.
Roger Sharp. All right, Roger.
He's in San Marcos. So
I've never met Roger. What's the skinny on Roger? Do you have any Have you gouged at all? You know what he wants to see?
I've actually talked to him and talked to him about my Schweitzer, and I've got a buddy that just did his check ride with him a couple of weeks ago, and he said he was great. And I'm not going to spill all his secrets, but hey, I'm a lawyer, so I research everything.
That's good. Yeah, you do. No, I think it's funny. Check rides are one of those things. I'm sure when you're a little bit older, like you are. I think we're about similar ages, so older than say like when I was 18 and getting my license. That was so stressful back then. It seemed like the weight of the world. And then I feel like once you've lived life a little bit, you're like, it's not that, it's just an evaluation, In fact, I've been thinking about doing a whole podcast just on talking about check ride and check ride anxiety. And, it's funny how riled up people get. And if you don't like check rides, man, this is not a good industry for you to be in, especially if you want to do it as a profession, because not only you got to do your check rides for the, to get to your certificates and ratings, but then every year, if you're at a 135 or even a 91, there's either an official check ride or an unofficial check ride. You're always being evaluated constantly.
As somebody who's getting ready for a check ride and who's, this far away from finishing, there's not a lot of resources for student pilots out there in the rotorcraft community. There's a ton of stuff on YouTube about, fixed wing pilots. And there's a lot of great, podcasts that I'm listening to as well on YouTube and on Spotify and all those places for the private pilot check ride, but they're all fixed wing specific. And so, I'm listening to them, but then a lot of things don't even apply to us. But I think it'd be cool for you to even podcast shorts for, somebody who's just gone through the check ride and talk about experiences. I'd love that.
Hey, look, I'll be the creative director here. Okay, Gerrit?
I will never not share ideas.
No, that is a good idea. I think it would be great to have more DPEs on. I've had a couple. DPEs always get a little weird because they don't want to talk. I feel like maybe there's the FAA is looking or something. It's like that you can't get too many secrets from them, other than just learning that they're human and they want you to be successful. But yeah, I think you're right. It would be fun, to chat with people that have recently gone through a check ride, whether it's a private check ride, a commercial instrument, an add-on.
That's a great idea you just had.
It's so good. Man, I'm so smart.
This is why you're the creative one.
Producer Zach, if you're listening, make that happen. No, I love it. It's cool. So juggling life, working and owning a full-time business and learning how to fly, what has that been like?
I was a partner in a regional firm that had offices across the Southwest. And in September of 2022, we decided to wind that company up and kind of make each office its own firm. And so that's where Texas Suits came from. And I've got 4 partners in this business here. And I'll tell you what, I wouldn't be able to do it if I didn't have them to, lean on as far as the business. Because my instructor calls me and says, hey, I've got an opening in an hour. Can you come down? And, if I'm not in court or anything, I'm packing up my stuff and I'm heading to the airport to have some fun. So it's a big time investment and it's financially burdensome as well. But luckily I'm in a position right now where I can do it, where I can handle it. And so I'm doing it.
That's awesome.
I'm having fun and I'm enjoying every minute of it.
Do you ever find yourself I noticed this when I would fly with professionals in the past, and by professionals, I mean business professionals, people that were maybe looking at helicopters as a hobby, something that they enjoy to do, not so much the professional path, that I would be flying with them, and it would be very hard for them to disconnect from their reality on the ground, right? Their phone's buzzing. Hey, can you take the controls? I'm like this, they're constantly, busy and they're distracted. Have you been able to be pretty good at disconnecting church and state?
Flying, whether it's in the powered parachute or now in the helicopter, has always been my relaxing place. And so that is where I disconnect from the stress of work and all the, forgive the language, but all the BS that comes with being a lawyer.
Oh my gosh. What kind of horrible language is that?
Hey, there's kids listening. And if there's not, I'm going to share it with some.
I did drop an F-bomb recently.
Actually, I heard that. didn't I?
Yeah.
It made it into the final cut.
I think they either kept it or they might have blurred it. We've had discussions on the HeliCASTS platform. Some of my cohorts on the platform and the law enforcement and in the military side, they have guests that maybe have colorful language. And so we're all helicopter pilots, right? So sometimes it's okay, but I try to keep it PG. That was my first. I either dropped an F-bomb or I said the poo-poo word. I don't remember, but I feel bad.
I've got a story on that. I don't want to say it, but the S word is a bad word in English, apparently, but in German it's not. And it's the same word, and it has generally the same meaning. And so my parents used the word a lot when I was younger. I used the word a lot when I was younger. And I went to where I was growing up in, I don't know, 4th grade, 5th grade. I went to a private school, and I used the S word. And my mom got called into the office because I got in trouble for it. And my mom, in her thick German accent, said, he said what? What word did he say? It's the S word? That's not a bad word. And just went down that
That's a good word.
And the principal started arguing with her, and then finally just, accepted.
What is the context? What is the context of what does it mean in German?
I'd probably align it with like saying darn or dang, something like that.
So it's like it is like it's a thing that you would say if you're annoyed, but it's very PG.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Less PG here.
Yeah, much less. Much less. I learned that the hard way.
It's just words, though. My wife. So it's funny that I've only really had one incident in the podcast where I dropped something, because the honest truth to my loyalists is that I have a potty mouth. I just swear a lot. And then if you meet my parents, you're like, okay, it makes sense, right? And no dig on you, mom, dad. Love you guys, great parents, but they swore a lot, and they still do. And so it's just like, I don't know, it's just who I am. It's just like my thing. And my wife is a little more proper than me, and she gets real upset. I'm like, it's just words, but I get it that some words obviously have meaning and whatnot. So who knows?
I'm with you on that. I've got two vocabularies, one that I can use among my friends and here in the office, and the other one that I use among strangers on a podcast or in front of a judge.
Yeah, you gotta be careful for sure. You gotta, what's the old saying? You gotta know your crowd.
Exactly.
And, do your due diligence on the crowd. Well, Gerrit, I really appreciate you being a fan of the podcast. Is there a particular podcast that you really remembered enjoying and something that you would recommend if someone's just listening to yours for the first time, of a podcast of mine that you enjoyed?
This podcast is brought to you by HeliCASTS. Tired of listings that go nowhere? Exhausted by tire kickers who waste your time? Don't sell your helicopter alone. HeliCASTS handles the entire process from start to finish. So, if your helicopter is sat too long waiting for a buyer, contact the team at HeliCASTS today for your complimentary market valuation. Call 1-855-HeliCASTS, 1-855-735-5226, or email sales@helicopter.com. HeliCASTS. List it, sell it, done.
They put me on the spot. How much you paying for this answer?
Well,
I don't know that I can pick out a specific one. I think there are certainly a couple that have stood out to me. There were a couple that you did at Heli Expo this year that I really enjoyed, but I couldn't put my finger on them. I will say, for anybody that's new into helicopters that really wants to get into them, they're probably looking at the experimental route. And so they should listen to the Adam one.
Yeah, Adam Weaver.
And I got to
wonder
shout
what
out
episode,
to him because he's a buddy.
Let me see. I'm gonna add it now. I'm gonna look here on when we did Adam Weaver podcast.
Perfect. That was a good one.
I think it's like way far back.
It was a while ago, but what was great about it is you guys dug into just the experimental world and what it takes to get an airworthiness certificate for an experimental aircraft and all that. So I really enjoyed that. And honestly, at the time, I was new into the experimental world too. So I learned a lot from that episode too.
Yeah, that dude he's a super smart guy. He's a super nice guy as well.
I will say this, you started talking about this earlier. Something that's so great about this platform and about your podcast in general is I listened to an episode and you always talk about people's Instagrams or handles. And so half the time I end up connecting with those people just because you go get through an episode, you feel like you know them or you have some sort of connection with them. And I mean, even here, I listened to an episode where you talk to somebody here in San Antonio. I reach out to you connect me with them, and I end up with a new friend that's local in my backyard.
Like I said, bro, it's a network, right?
It is.
And that's as we're creating a network. So it's episode 22. So this is like deep.
That was a while ago, yeah.
So this was welcome to today's podcast episode where we explore the world of experimental helicopters with Adam Weaver, the owner of a Rotorway Jet Exec, a turbine helicopter that he built himself over a period of 10 years. I forgot about that.
That's right.
Took the guy 10 years. See, I would have that's my problem. I'm like the guy that gets the thing right away and tries to put it together, and it never goes well. That's me.
I will say this. I have a lot of patience. I dang sure don't have that much patience.
No, that's special. The conversation can be polarizing, but it's a super educational, informative one. As a certified helicopter guy, the idea of a home-built helicopter makes me a little uncomfortable. However, Adam's expertise and insights have shown that it's all about who's building and flying the aircraft, just like we talked about with Adam. So it's episode 22. So if you're interested in learning more about jet execs and experimental, sorry, my screen just popped up and I thought I lost you. You listen to that, listen to this episode. What is a good way for people to reach out to you, Gerrit?
I'm a big fan of email. So my email is Gerrit, Gerrit, at txsuits.com, txsuits. Or my Instagram is Gerrit Schulze 16. And I'm pretty responsive either at any of those places. Or they can reach out to you, schedule themselves on your podcast, and then you can share my contact.
That's true. Yeah, you always feel free to reach out to me if you're ever trying to get a hold of a past guest. Halsey is my preferred handle now. But do the helicopter podcast and helicopter also work. Man, I got the hiccups. Not a great thing.
That's great during a podcast.
It's very uncomfortable. Well, Gerrit, we came, we saw, we conquered. It was great connecting.
Likewise.
It's really cool. I really do mean it. The community has been awesome, and being able to create a friendship with you has been great, but also a business working relationship. You helped me make some money recently. I paid some of your billables.
Even better.
I've connected you, like you said, with DE over there. So that's awesome. So let's keep this community going. And it's people like you that are willing to reach out and start conversation with me. So if you're listening and you're like, man, Halsey's so cool and he's so scary, I shouldn't reach out. Look, I get it. I'm very intimidating. But pick up your phone, go to Halsey and reach out. Because the opposite is like true. I'm like that person that you meet and you're probably going to be disappointed. But
man, I don't want to break this for you, but nobody thinks you're scary. And
yeah, man. I was being facetious.
I've never met a scary bald man.
What do you think about me getting a hair transplant? I'm actually really considering it.
Maybe start with a toupee.
I'm thinking turkey. $5,000 stem cell, full thousands of grafts. And I apparently like this is good. All this stuff grows really nicely, but I am rocking my Heli Life hat. Not a sponsor of the podcast, but if you're not familiar with Heli Life, it's my good buddy York kind of created this brand. Him and his son are running it now. And I think it encapsulates the helicopter podcast well, because it's, Heli Life. But to our listeners, thank you for supporting and listening to the helicopter podcast. Gerrit, thank you for coming on. It's long overdue. And yeah, we'll see everyone next time. Gerrit, any parting words?
Man, thank you so much for having me. Keep it up. Please keep this podcast going, because these are all so great and I'm completely caught up. So
have you actually listened to everyone?
Every single one.
You're weird.
I live an hour north of my office, so it's perfect to fill the drive time.
You know what's funny is I never listened to one of my podcasts ever.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to listen to this episode. I've heard it.
I don't like well, that's one thing, is I was here for it. And then I'm always like, I'll record an episode. I'll be like, man, no ums, no ahs. I'm great. And then I'll listen to the episode. It's like, I'm Halsey, me, I'm like, God, I suck. So
as a lawyer, sometimes I get to read transcripts of things that I said in court, And I remember being in court thinking, man, I killed it. That was best presentation ever. And then I read the transcript. Like, did I really say that? How dumb of me.
Yeah, because the court reporter, they'll write everything. I'm trying. I think the uhs and the ums, I mean, it's very common filler. I get better. I think podcasting is interesting because it's actually something that you learn. You get better. You evolve. My style of podcasting is interesting too because I don't do any planning. I don't prep.
No kidding.
I don't. In fact, half the time when I'm talking, I'm actually doing the Rubik's Cube. Thank you for listening.
That's a lot.
To this edition of the Helicopter Podcast. Peace. Thanks, Gerrit.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you to our sponsor, Vertical Aviation International. Are you ready for the largest vertical aviation show in the world? Verticon, formerly HAI HeliExpo, is coming to Dallas in March. With over 15,000 professionals and 600 companies in attendance, this is an event you don't want to miss. If you're interested in exhibiting, contact sales at verticalavi.org. That's sales at verticalavi.org. See you at Verticon.
Bell is proud to sponsor Vertical HeliCASTS and their vision to hold meaningful mission, safety, and best practice conversations in the helicopter industry. The lessons learned from these conversations will undoubtedly shape the future of both new and veteran helicopter operators. This podcast is brought to you by Helicopter. Tired of listings that go nowhere? Exhausted by tire kickers who waste your time? Don't sell your helicopter alone. Helicopter handles the entire process from start to finish. So, if your helicopter has sat too long waiting for a buyer, contact the team at Helicopter today for your complimentary market valuation. Call 1-855-Helicopter, 1-855-735-5226, or email sales@helicopter.com. Helicopter. List it, sell it, done.